Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today I'm going to make some color swatches from some of the new colors that I've purchased from Pro Chemical and Dye, a couple from Dyespin, and the spring Muck Dye colors from Dharma Trading Company. The first thing I'm going to do is unbox a box of colors which I purchased from Pro Chemical and Dye. Some of these are new colors that I haven't ever purchased before, and some of them are just refills of colors that I was out of. And as you can see, the box is packed really well. The first thing I do after I get in a new dye order is I mark the tops of the jars with the names of the dye color. I store my dye on some rolling metal shelving units, and I like to be able to see what the dye color is from the top of the jar without having to necessarily look at the front of the jar. I either use a black Sharpie or I use a white paint pen if the lid is dark. As well as writing the dye color name on top of the jar, I usually put an initial for the dye supplier, like D for Dharma, PC for Pro Chemical, DS for Dyespin, and so on. I also turn the dye jar over and write the year on the bottom of the jar. That way, if I have a couple of jars of the same dye color, I know which one is the oldest. Not all the colors that I've gotten in today are brand new to me, so I'm only going to make color swatches for the ones that are new. To do that, I'm going to use some 100% cotton fabric, cut it into squares, and then I'm going to use my black Sharpie to write the name of the dye, and again, I'm going to add that initial for the dye supplier. You know, quite a few of the dye suppliers have the same color names. Today I'm doing one from Pro Chemical that's called Grape, and Dharma has a grape as well. Sometimes the colors are very different looking, but sometimes they're really close, and so if I don't mark my color swatches, they can easily get mixed up. If you ever see any of my older color swatches that maybe don't have initials after the name, they're always Dharma color swatches. I started out using nothing but Dharma dye until just a few years ago, and so my older swatches don't have that D after the color name. By the way, I always pre-wash and dry my fabric that I'm going to use for my color swatches. I try to treat it the same way that I would treat a t-shirt. I only filmed the process of making both liquid and ice dyed swatches for the Dharma Muck Dye colors that were available in spring of 2024. I've soaked my pieces of fabric in a soda ash solution, then I wrung them out. I'm going to start with the liquid dye, and I'm going to start by placing each swatch inside of its own small Ziploc bag. I mixed up very small quantities of the liquid dye because I'm only going to use it for swatches and maybe a few little odd and end projects. So I used the formula of 2 teaspoons of dye into 1 cup of water, but I scaled mine down and only used a half a teaspoon of dye into a 1/4 cup of water. I'm squirting or pouring just a little bit of dye inside that baggie, and then I'm squishing the dye around on top of the color swatch so that it gets fully saturated. Then I'm going to seal up the bag and put it aside. After I clean up my mess I just made, I'm going to do the ice dyed swatches. I'm going to rack dye my swatches, and I've placed them on top of a rack that has collapsible legs inside of a plastic tub or tote. Then I'm taking a silicone cake mold, and that's what I'm going to use as my ice barrier for each ice dyed swatch. I'm going to apply the dye over the top of the ice, so I'm starting out by taking my dye swatches and placing one in each one of the silicone cake molds. And if you're wondering how I know which dye is which, I've placed my dye colors in the plastic container next to my rack in the same order as I'm placing the color swatches in the silicone cake molds. Then I'm going to add a little bit of ice on top of each dye swatch, place the dye on top along with a small sprinkle of soda ash. Because these swatches are very small, it doesn't take a whole lot of dye. However, I want to add enough dye that I don't have a whole lot of white left on my color swatch, but not so much dye that it pretty much just makes the color swatch a solid color without allowing any of the color splits to show. This just kind of takes a little bit of practice. I tend to use quite a bit of dye, so I really have to restrain myself. After the ice melts on the color swatches, since the fabric is so small and so thin, I take the color swatch out of the silicone cake mold and put each individual swatch in its own plastic baggie. That'll help keep it from drying out while it's processing. Then I place the swatches aside and allow them all to process for at least 24 hours after the ice melted on the ice-dyed ones. To rinse the swatches, I rinse them out the same way I do a shirt. I start out in cold water, rinse them in cold, then I warm the water up to hot, and I even do a hot water soak on them by adding a little bit of hot water and Blue Dawn dish detergent to a container and placing the rinsed out color swatches in that container. When my water is remaining almost clear in the container, I put them in my washing machine along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent, and I wash them using a hot water cycle. Okay, so I've washed all my swatches, dried them, and given them a quick iron, and let's see what they look like. Okay, so the first few swatches are the Pro Chemical and Dye colors, and I have the liquid dye always on the left and the ice dye on the right. The next colors are the Muck Dyed colors from Dharma Trading Company. And if you weren't able to get those when they were for sale, those are usually colors that once they sell out, you can't purchase them. But I did want to go ahead and swatch them because I think there are some really cool colors. The final dye that I swatched was Mindbender, which is a dark horse dye from Dyespin. Those are intended especially for ice dyeing, so I didn't even do a liquid dyed swatch of that one. They have two versions though. They have a Mindbender A and a Mindbender B. And according to Dyespin's website, Mindbender B has double the blue, but otherwise the formulas are the same. And you can kind of see that in this swatch. The purple on the Mindbender B is a little bit more of a blue purple than on the A, but I think they're both really cool colors. I've used the Mindbender on a couple of shirts lately, and so I am working on the videos for those now, and we'll hopefully get those posted soon. So if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it, and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.